Have you ever given everything to a company that didn't even blink when they threw you away? What I did next shocked everyone, including myself. If you enjoy stories about corporate revenge and standing up for yourself, hit that like button and subscribe for more real-life dramas that will make your jaw drop. 20 years. That's how long I dedicated to Pinnacle Technologies. 2 decades of my life poured into making their automated manufacturing systems the best in the industry. I started as a database administrator when I was just 28, fresh out of my master's program with stars in my eyes and dreams of building something that would last. Caroline, you have a natural talent for this, my first boss, Henry, told me during my initial performance review. He was right. I did have a knack for database architecture and system integration. What he didn't tell me was that talent alone wouldn't protect me from corporate politics. Over the years, I climbed from junior administrator to senior database architect, building and maintaining the proprietary system that controlled Pinnacle's crown jewel, their $1.3 billion smart manufacturing facility in Michigan. This wasn't just any factory. It was a marvel of automation that produced high-precision components for everything from medical devices to aerospace parts. And the entire operation relied on my database system, my baby, that I had nurtured and evolved for nearly 15 years. The Atlas system, I called it. Automated technical logistics and scheduling. Every production schedule, every quality control parameter, every inventory count, every shipping manifest, all of it flowed through Atlas. The system was complex but elegant, with redundancies and fail-safes I'd meticulously designed. The board once calculated that every hour of downtime cost the company $430,000 in lost production. They never spared any expense when it came to hardware upgrades for Atlas. "You're indispensable, Caroline," David Mercer, the CTO, used to say to me at our quarterly reviews. "This company couldn't function without you and your system." I believed him. I turned down job offers from Silicon Valley startups and tech giants alike. I postponed having children. I missed my father's 70th birthday party to solve an emergency data migration issue. I canceled vacations when problems arose. My marriage to Thomas suffered, eventually collapsing under the weight of my dedication to Pinnacle. But I told myself it was worth it. I was building something important. I was valued. Then came the merger with Global Dynamics. This is an exciting new chapter for Pinnacle. CEO Richard Coleman announced in an all-hands meeting 6 months ago. Global Dynamics brings complementary technology and expanded market reach. Together, we'll be unstoppable. What he didn't say was that Global Dynamics had their own team of database engineers with their own system called Nexus. And they had the ear of the new executive board. Marcus Webb, Global's CIO, visited our facility 3 months after the merger. He was all smiles and handshakes, but I sensed the assessment happening behind his eyes. "So you built this entire system yourself?" he asked, scrolling through my code documentation. "Over many years, yes, with input from our production and engineering teams, of course. Impressive, very personalized approach. At Global, we've taken a more standardized direction with Nexus." There it was. The first hint. The integration team meetings started 2 weeks later. I was invited to the first 3, then mysteriously left off the email list for the 4th. When I showed up anyway, Marcus looked surprised. "Oh, Caroline, we didn't think you needed to be here for the technical compatibility discussions. I designed the entire Atlas system. How would I not need to be here? We're actually discussing a potential full migration to Nexus across all facilities." My stomach dropped. That would be a massive undertaking. Atlas is specifically optimized for our production processes. You can't just swap it out like changing a light bulb. We understand that. But standardization across all facilities is a priority for the new board. I fought for my system over the next 2 months. I created presentations showing the risks of migration, the cost of downtime, the specialized features Atlas provided that Nexus couldn't match. I stayed late preparing reports, skipped lunches to corner executives in hallways, and called in favors from production managers to back me up. Some days I thought I was making headway. David Mercer seemed to be advocating for me in meetings I wasn't invited to, but then I noticed he stopped making eye contact in the hallways. The morning it happened started like any other. I stopped for my usual latte at the coffee shop near the office. The barista, Kelly, knew my order by heart. "Large vanilla latte for the computer genius," she called out with a smile. If only Pinnacle valued me as much as my local coffee shop did. When I arrived at my desk, my keycard didn't work on the secure door to the database administration section. Odd. I called security from my cell phone. "Ms. Sinclair? Can you please report to HR? Lisa wants to see you." Lisa Jenkins, head of HR. We'd had lunch just last week, discussing her daughter's college applications. When I arrived at her office, David Mercer was there too, looking uncomfortable. And a security guard stood by the door. "Please sit down, Caroline," Lisa said, her voice professional but with a hint of genuine regret. "What's going on?" "As part of the post-merger restructuring, we're consolidating our IT infrastructure teams," she began. The rest came out in HR jargon that all meant one thing. I was being let go. "We value your contributions over the past 20 years, David said, not quite meeting my eyes. "But the decision has been made at the highest level to standardize on the Nexus platform." "You're firing me? After 20 years?" The words felt surreal coming out of my mouth. "We're eliminating your position," Lisa corrected gently, "along with several others in IT. You'll receive a generous severance package." "Who's going to maintain Atlas during the transition?" I interrupted. "You can't just shut it down overnight." David shifted in his seat. "We've hired 2 consultants from the Nexus development team. They've been studying the Atlas documentation for the past month to prepare for a phased migration." That's when it hit me. They'd been planning this for months while I fought to save my job. They'd already replaced me. "Your system is well documented, Caroline," David added, as if that would make me feel better. "That's a testament to your professionalism." Yes, I had documented everything meticulously. Every function, every dependency, every workaround for the system's quirks. I'd been a good soldier. "We'll need you to surrender your company devices and access credentials," Lisa said. "Trevor here will escort you to clear out your personal belongings." I sat there, stunned into silence. 20 years. Ended in a 15-minute meeting. "Can I at least say goodbye to my team?" I asked. Lisa and David exchanged glances. "We think it would be best if you left now," David said. "We'll communicate the change to the team. Your personal items will be packed and sent to you." As Trevor escorted me to the parking lot, I passed the cubicle farm where my team worked. Through the glass walls, I could see them at their desks, unaware that their leader was being marched out. Jake, who I'd mentored since he was an intern. Melissa, who'd just bought her first house with my recommendation letter helping secure her mortgage. They didn't even look up. In my car, I sat with my hands on the steering wheel, not starting the engine. 20 years. The prime of my career, my marriage, countless personal sacrifices. All for a company that couldn't even let me say goodbye to my colleagues. That's when an idea began to form in my mind. A dangerous idea. I sat in my car in the Pinnacle parking lot for nearly an hour, cycling through emotions. Shock, grief, humiliation, and finally, anger, white-hot and clarifying. They hadn't just fired me. They had planned my obsolescence for months, while I naively fought for my place. They had studied my documentation, picked my brain in meetings disguised as integration discussions, and prepared to discard me once they had what they needed. The most infuriating part? I had built Atlas to be comprehensible to other engineers. I'd documented every function, every quirk, every workaround. I'd been a good team player, never hoarding knowledge as job security. And this was my reward. I started my car and drove, not home, but to a small coffee shop across town, somewhere no Pinnacle employee would likely visit. I ordered a black coffee and opened my personal laptop. While I no longer had direct access to Pinnacle's systems, I did have something almost as valuable: intimate knowledge of Atlas's architecture and its vulnerabilities. After all, I'd built in several backdoor access points years ago for emergency maintenance. Standard practice, really. Nothing nefarious about it at the time, just responsible system design to allow critical fixes without going through normal authentication channels during emergencies. The question was, did they know about these backdoors? Had my thorough documentation revealed them? Some, certainly. The official ones were properly documented in the disaster recovery procedures. But there was one I'd created during a particularly stressful system migration 4 years ago. A small script that bypassed the usual security protocols, installed on an obscure virtual server that was technically part of the testing environment but had access paths to the production system. I'd meant to remove it after the migration, but got pulled into another crisis. Then another. Eventually, I forgot about it. Until now. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. What I was contemplating wasn't just career suicide. It could be criminal. I could face serious charges. Was my revenge worth that risk? I closed my laptop without taking action and drove home to my empty house. The home that should have been filled with the family I never started because I was too busy building someone else's empire. For 3 days, I barely left my bed. I ignored calls from friends and former colleagues. I subsisted on delivery food and scrolled mindlessly through streaming services without actually watching anything. On the 4th day, my doorbell rang. It was Jake from my team, looking uncomfortable on my porch. "They told us you decided to leave for personal reasons," he said when I let him in. "But nobody's buying it. What really happened?" I told him everything over coffee at my kitchen table. The merger, the integration meetings, the replacement. "They've got these 2 guys from Global trying to understand Atlas now," Jake said. "They're constantly asking us questions about how things work. Neither of them seems to grasp the underlying architecture. What about the migration to Nexus? It's a mess. They're discovering that Nexus can't handle half the specialized functions Atlas performs for the Michigan factory. But the executives are insisting it has to happen." A small, dark part of me was pleased by this news. They were struggling without me. "I just wanted you to know that the team misses you," Jake said as he was leaving. "And we know they did you dirty." After Jake left, I felt a renewed sense of purpose. Not for revenge exactly, but for justice? Was that the right word for what I was contemplating? I opened my laptop and began accessing public information about Pinnacle. Their stock was down 3% since the merger announcement. Nothing catastrophic, but not the positive response the board had likely anticipated. Their quarterly earnings call was scheduled for next week. I didn't need to destroy Atlas. I just needed to demonstrate its value, and by extension, my value, in the most dramatic way possible. The next morning, I drove to a different coffee shop and connected to their public Wi-Fi through a VPN. I accessed the forgotten testing server through my backdoor account and began exploring. To my relief, it was still there, forgotten by the IT security team in the transition. I didn't delete anything. That would be too obvious and too destructive. Instead, I planted a subtle time bomb, a script that would trigger a cascading series of system lockouts exactly 2 hours after the quarterly earnings call began. Not a virus or malware, but a series of administrative commands that would essentially put Atlas into a protective hibernation mode, one that would require my specific knowledge to reverse. The factory wouldn't be permanently damaged. Production would halt, yes. Data would be inaccessible, yes. But everything would remain intact, just frozen, waiting for someone who understood Atlas's deepest secrets to awaken it. Someone like me. I closed my laptop, ordered another coffee, and considered what I'd done. Was it wrong? Absolutely. Was it justified? Perhaps not in any moral framework I'd previously subscribed to, but in the raw, wounded place I now inhabited, it felt like poetic justice. The next week crawled by. I began going through the motions of job searching, updating my resume, and reaching out to old contacts in the industry. I even had a promising call with a tech firm in Boston. Life was moving forward, even as part of me remained fixated on the upcoming earnings call. When the day arrived, I watched the live stream from my home office. Richard Coleman, looking confident in an expensive suit, touted the successful integration of global dynamics and the projected synergies that would boost shareholder value. David Mercer spoke briefly about technology standardization across all facilities, carefully avoiding any mention of the challenges Jake had described. Our Michigan facility continues to be our highest-performing production center, Coleman said, and we anticipate even greater efficiencies as we implement our new unified systems approach. The irony was almost too much to bear. In less than 2 hours, their highest-performing production center would grind to a halt. As the call wrapped up and analysts began asking questions, my phone rang. The caller ID showed a number I didn't recognize. "Hello?" I answered cautiously. "Caroline Sinclair?" A deep voice I didn't recognize. "Yes? Who's this?" "My name is Robert Chen. I'm the new CIO at Pinnacle Technologies. I was hoping we could meet. Today, if possible?" My heart raced. Had they discovered my intrusion? Were they tracking me down before my plan could execute? "What's this regarding?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "Let's just say I've been reviewing our system architecture and have some concerns I'd like to discuss with you, particularly about Atlas." I checked the time. 1 hour and 40 minutes until the script would activate. "I'm not a Pinnacle employee anymore," I said carefully. "I'm well aware of that, Ms. Sinclair, and I'm aware of the circumstances of your departure. That's partly what I want to discuss." I hesitated. "Where and when?" "There's a coffee shop called Vintage Grounds on Maple Street. Can you be there in 30 minutes? After hanging up, I paced my home office, debating my options. I could run. I could call a lawyer. I could remotely try to stop the script, though that would leave evidence of my tampering. Or I could meet this Robert Chen and find out what he knew. Curiosity, and perhaps a desire to face the consequences of my actions, won out. 40 minutes later, I was sitting across from a man in his early 50s with salt and pepper hair and rimless glasses, dressed not in the typical Pinnacle executive suit, but in a casual button-down and jeans. "Thank you for coming," he said, pushing a latte across the table to me. My usual order. That was unsettling. "How did you know what coffee I drink?" He smiled slightly. "I've been learning everything I can about you for the past week. Your coffee preference was in an email thread about a team birthday celebration from last year." "Woo, why are you investigating me?" "Because in my first week as CIO, I discovered that Pinnacle's most valuable production facility runs on a proprietary system built and maintained primarily by one person for 15 years. A person who was recently terminated with minimal transition planning." He took a sip of his own coffee. "That struck me as an extraordinary risk to the business." I said nothing, watching him carefully. "I also discovered," he continued, "that this system, Atlas, is remarkably sophisticated and specifically tailored to our production requirements in ways that our supposed replacement system is not." "And when did you start at Pinnacle?" I asked. 2 weeks ago, after the decision to let you go, but before it was implemented. I wasn't consulted." I took a careful sip of my latte, mind racing. "Why are you telling me this?" Chen leaned forward. "Because in approximately..." He checked his watch. 53 minutes, I believe Atlas is going to experience a significant disruption, and you're the only person who can prevent that from happening." My blood ran cold. "What makes you think that?" "Because I found your backdoor access point yesterday, and I found the script scheduled to execute during our earnings call. Very elegant work, by the way. Almost undetectable." I set down my coffee cup carefully. "Am I being recorded right now? Is this some kind of sting operation?" Chen shook his head. "This is me trying to save both of us a lot of trouble. You don't want to go to prison for computer fraud, and I don't want to explain to the board why our billion-dollar factory is offline during a critical production period for our biggest aerospace client. So what do you want?" "I want you to deactivate the script. And then I want to offer you a job." I stared at Robert Chen, certain I'd misheard him. "You want to offer me a job? After discovering I sabotaged the company's system?" "I prefer to think of it as you demonstrating the business-critical nature of your expertise," Chen replied calmly. "And yes, I want to hire you back. Not as an employee, but as a specialized consultant to manage the Atlas system and train a proper transition team. Why would you do that? Why not just call the FBI? Because I've been at Pinnacle for 2 weeks, and I've already identified their biggest mistake: letting you go without understanding what they were losing. He glanced at his watch. We now have 48 minutes before your script executes. Should we continue this philosophical discussion, or would you like to hear my offer? My mind raced through the possibilities. Was this a trap? A trick to get me to confess? But if Chen had already found my script, he had all the evidence he needed. I'm listening, I said cautiously. 1-year contract, consultant title, triple your previous salary. You maintain Atlas while training a proper team to eventually take over. You get full credit for your work, including patents for any proprietary methods you've developed. And when the contract ends, you get a formal recommendation and public acknowledgement of your contributions to Pinnacle. It sounded too good to be true. And what about the current plan to migrate to Nexus? That decision was made without proper technical evaluation. I've already begun documenting why it's problematic. Your little time bomb will make my case for me, if we let it execute. I raised an eyebrow. If? Chen smiled slightly. I'm giving you a choice, Ms. Sinclair. Deactivate your script, accept my offer, and help me build a proper transition plan for Atlas. Or don't, and I'll have no choice but to report what I've found. What about Marcus Webb and the Global Dynamics team? They won't just accept this reversal. Let me worry about the politics. You focus on the technology. He pushed a folder across the table. This is the contract, already drawn up and signed by me. All it needs is your signature and for you to deactivate that script. I opened the folder and skimmed the contract. It was exactly as he'd described. Generous terms, clear expectations, and even a non-disclosure agreement that would prevent Pinnacle from taking legal action regarding the security assessment I had performed on their systems. This is crazy, I said, half to myself. You're rewarding me for what amounts to corporate sabotage. I'm recognizing talent and addressing a critical business risk. Chen checked his watch again. 39 minutes, Ms. Sinclair. What's it going to be? Part of me, the part still burning with resentment, wanted to let the script run, to watch Pinnacle scramble as their precious factory ground to a halt, to force them to come begging for my help. But the rational part of me recognized that Chen was offering something better than revenge: validation, recognition of my value, and a chance to protect my creation while securing my future. I need to access the system to deactivate it, I said. Chen handed me a laptop, already connected through a secure VPN to the test server where you planted your script. I logged in, navigated to the hidden directory where my script resided, and hesitated with my finger over the delete key. Was I giving up too easily? Surrendering my one moment of power? No, I realized. This was power too. The power to choose a better path than the one Rage had initially set me on. I deleted the script, then ran a command to verify it was gone. It's done. Chen nodded, visibly relieved. Thank you. Now, about that contract. I took the pen he offered and signed my name. As I did, a weight lifted from my shoulders, not completely, but enough to feel the difference. When do I start? I asked. Right now, if you're willing. There's a factory full of workers whose jobs depend on Atlas running smoothly. We drove separately to the Pinnacle campus. As we walked toward the main entrance, I felt a flutter of anxiety. What about security? My badge was deactivated. I had a new one made this morning. Chen handed me a consultant badge with my name on it. Optimistic of me, perhaps, but I've learned to trust my instincts about people. The security guard did a double-take when he saw me, but waved us through after Chen explained I was now a consultant under his direct supervision. As we walked through the familiar corridors toward the IT department, I braced myself for awkward encounters with former colleagues. We rounded a corner and nearly collided with David Mercer. His eyes widened. Caroline? What are you doing here? Before I could respond, Chen stepped forward. Mr. Mercer, this is Caroline Sinclair, our new senior systems consultant. She'll be working with me on the Atlas system evaluation I mentioned in yesterday's meeting. Mercer looked from Chen to me and back again, confusion evident on his face. But we already have consultants from Global working on the migration to Nexus. Yes, and Ms. Sinclair will be assessing whether that migration is technically feasible within our required parameters. As I explained in my preliminary report, there are significant concerns about Nexus's capability to handle our specialized manufacturing processes. Mercer's face tightened. This is highly irregular, Robert. The board has already approved the Nexus migration. Based on incomplete technical information, Chen replied calmly. My job is to provide complete information, which is what Ms. Sinclair will help me do. We'll discuss this later, Mercer said tersely before continuing down the hallway. Chen watched him go. He's one of the executives who approved your termination without consulting the technical implications. I gathered that, I said dryly. We continued to the database administration area where my team worked. As we entered, heads turned and conversation stopped. Jake was the first to react, a broad smile spreading across his face. Caroline, you're back! Chen addressed the room. Everyone, for those who don't know me, I'm Robert Chen, the new CIO. And yes, Caroline Sinclair has returned as a senior systems consultant reporting directly to me. She'll be leading an evaluation of Atlas and the proposed Nexus migration. He turned to me. I'll let you get reacquainted with your team. We'll meet in my office at 3 to discuss next steps. After Chen left, the team surrounded me with questions and expressions of support. It felt good to be back among people who appreciated my work, even as I noted the absence of the 2 Global Dynamics consultants who had presumably been studying my documentation. They're usually in the conference room, Jake explained when I asked. They don't interact with us much. Just demand information and disappear to compile their migration plans. Well, those plans may be changing, I said. For the next several hours, I reacquainted myself with Atlas, checking logs and performance metrics. Everything was running normally, though I noticed several inefficient queries that had been introduced since my departure. At 3 o'clock, I headed to Chen's office, passing the conference room where the global consultants worked. Through the glass wall, I could see Marcus Webb from Global Dynamics gesturing animatedly while the 2 consultants nodded. They didn't notice me walking by. Chen was reviewing documents when I entered his office. How does it feel to be back? He asked. Surreal, I admitted. But right somehow. Good. Now let's talk strategy. The quarterly earnings call went well, but Marcus Webb is already pushing back on your involvement. He's meeting with Coleman tomorrow to protest. What's our counter-move? Chen smiled at my use of our. We need to demonstrate conclusively that Atlas is superior to Nexus for our specific manufacturing requirements. I need you to prepare a detailed comparison by tomorrow morning. That's not much time. No, it's not. But from what I've seen of your work, you're thorough under pressure. I worked late into the night with Jake and 2 other team members, compiling a comprehensive analysis of Atlas versus Nexus. We identified 27 critical functions that Atlas performed that Nexus couldn't match without significant customization. Customization that would effectively mean rebuilding Atlas under a different name. The next morning, armed with our report and Chen's backing, I entered a meeting with the executive leadership team. Richard Coleman, David Mercer, Marcus Webb, and 5 other executives sat around the conference table, expressions ranging from curious to hostile. Chen began the presentation, explaining how he'd brought me back as a consultant to evaluate the true technical requirements for the Michigan factory. Then he turned the floor over to me. Atlas was built specifically for Pinnacle's manufacturing processes, I explained, projecting slides that illustrated the system's architecture. It's not just a database or a scheduling system. It's an integrated platform that has evolved alongside your production capabilities for 15 years. I detailed the specialized functions Atlas performed that Nexus couldn't match: real-time quality control adjustments, predictive maintenance algorithms tuned to specific machinery, custom inventory management protocols that reduced waste by 23%. The bottom line, I concluded, is that replacing Atlas with Nexus would require either accepting significant reductions in efficiency or spending millions to customize Nexus to replicate functions Atlas already performs perfectly. Marcus Webb leaned forward. This analysis is biased. Ms. Sinclair built Atlas. Of course she thinks it's irreplaceable. That's why I verified her findings independently, Chen replied, and had our production managers confirm the operational impacts. The decision to standardize on Nexus has already been made, Webb insisted. Chen nodded. Decisions based on incomplete information can be revised when better information becomes available. That's just good business. Richard Coleman, who had been silent throughout the presentation, finally spoke. What exactly are you proposing, Robert? Maintain Atlas for the Michigan facility. Use Nexus where it makes sense, in the facilities that Global Dynamics already operates. Create APIs for the systems to communicate where necessary. And most importantly, have Ms. Sinclair train a proper team to maintain and evolve Atlas, so we're never again in a position where critical business infrastructure depends on a single person. Coleman looked at me. And you'd be willing to do this? After how things ended? I met his gaze steadily. I built Atlas for Pinnacle. I believe in what it can do. And yes, I'm willing to ensure its continued success, under the right conditions. Coleman nodded slowly. I want a detailed cost analysis of both approaches by next week. If the numbers support keeping Atlas, we'll revisit the decision. It wasn't a complete victory, but it was a start. As the meeting broke up, Marcus Webb brushed past me without a word, his face tight with anger. David Mercer looked troubled, but managed a curt nod. Chen and I walked back to the IT department together. That went well, he said. It's not decided yet. No, but Coleman is pragmatic above all else. When he sees the cost comparisons, he'll make the right choice. And if he doesn't? Chen smiled. Then we move to Plan B. Which is? Let's hope we don't need to find out. The next week was a blur of analysis, meetings, and careful political maneuvering. I worked closely with Chen to document every advantage Atlas had over Nexus, while simultaneously beginning to train my team on the system's deeper architecture. If I was going to make myself replaceable, in a good way this time, I needed to share the knowledge I'd previously held too close. Jake proved to be an especially apt student. I always wondered how the predictive maintenance module worked, he said as I walked him through the code. It's brilliant how you integrated the machinery wear patterns into the scheduling algorithm. It took 3 years of failure data to tune it properly, I explained. That's what Nexus would be missing. Not just the code, but the institutional knowledge embedded in it. The cost analysis we presented to Coleman was conclusive. Maintaining Atlas for the Michigan facility would save at least $7.2 million in the first year alone, compared to adapting Nexus to handle the specialized functions. More importantly, it would eliminate the risk of production disruptions during a complex system migration. Coleman, to his credit, recognized the business logic. We'll maintain Atlas for Michigan, he announced in an executive meeting 2 weeks after my return, and proceed with Nexus implementations at the other facilities as planned. Marcus Webb was furious. This undermines the entire standardization strategy, he protested. The strategy was to maximize efficiency, Coleman corrected him. This approach does that. The systems will still be able to communicate through the APIs Dr. Chen and Ms. Sinclair have designed. It was a victory, but not one without consequences. Webb and his team became increasingly hostile, attempting to undermine our work at every turn. They questioned our timelines, challenged our technical assessments, and tried to poach members of my team for Nexus implementation roles. Through it all, Chen provided political cover while I focused on the technical work and knowledge transfer. We settled into an effective partnership that gradually expanded Atlas's support team from essentially just me to a group of 6 skilled engineers who understood the system's core functions. 3 months into my contract, I was working late one evening when David Mercer appeared in the doorway of my temporary office. "Got a minute?" he asked, his expression unreadable. "Sure." I gestured to the chair across from my desk, curious about what had prompted this visit. Mercer sat down, looking uncomfortable. "I owe you an apology, Caroline. The way your termination was handled was unprofessional. I raised an eyebrow but said nothing. I should have fought harder to keep you, he continued, or at least ensured a proper transition. It was a mistake. Why are you telling me this now? He sighed. Because I'm leaving Pinnacle. The merger hasn't gone as planned, and Coleman wants new leadership for the technology division. Chen's taking over as CTO. This was news to me. I'm sorry to hear that. Are you? He smiled faintly. You have every right to celebrate my downfall. I don't view it that way, I said honestly. What happened between us was business, not personal. At least not on your end. And on your end? I considered the question. On my end, it felt personal because I'd given so much of myself to this company. To Atlas. Mercer nodded slowly. That's fair. For what it's worth, you've proven your point. Atlas is clearly superior for our manufacturing processes. Webb and his team have acknowledged as much, though not publicly. It was never about being right, I said. It was about being valued. And now, do you feel valued? I thought about Chen's straightforward respect for my expertise, the renewed engagement with my team, and the satisfaction of seeing Atlas continue to evolve under proper stewardship. Yes, I said. I do. After Mercer left, I sat thinking about how much had changed in just a few months. From dedicated employee to vengeful saboteur to respected consultant. It had been quite a journey. My phone buzzed with a text from Chen. Good news. Stop by my office tomorrow morning. The next day, Chen shared that Coleman had approved extending my contract for another year, with an option for permanent employment afterward if I wanted it. They've finally recognized your value, Chen said, though it took nearly losing everything to get there. Speaking of which, I said, there's something I've never asked you. How did you really find my script? It was well hidden, even for someone looking for it. Chen smiled. Let's just say I've been in your position before. At my previous company, I built a system that they decided to replace without proper evaluation. I didn't plant a time bomb, but I considered it. So you were looking for it because it's what you might have done. Essentially, when I reviewed the system architecture and learned about your sudden departure, I put myself in your shoes. Where would I have left myself a back door? What would I do if I felt betrayed after 20 years? I shook my head, amazed, and instead of turning me in, you offered me a job. I recognized talent worth salvaging and a system worth saving. He shrugged. The fact that it made good business sense just made it easier to justify. Over the next 6 months, we completed the API integration between Atlas and Nexus, allowing the systems to communicate seamlessly, while each handled the functions they performed best. The Michigan factory continued to be Pinnacle's highest-performing facility, with Atlas enabling production efficiencies that the other locations couldn't match. Marcus Webb eventually left to pursue another opportunity, unable to accept the compromise solution we'd implemented. His departure eased many of the political tensions that had lingered after the merger. As my first year as a consultant neared its end, Chen, now fully established as CTO, approached me with a new proposal. We want to package Atlas as a product, he explained. Offer it to other manufacturers as a premium manufacturing execution system, with you as the chief architect. You want to sell Atlas? The idea had never occurred to me. With significant profit sharing for you, as the original creator. Coleman has already approved the business plan. It was the ultimate validation, not just acknowledging the value of what I'd built, but betting the company's future growth on it. 1 year after being escorted out of the building, I sat in the same conference room where I'd been terminated, now presenting the Atlas commercialization strategy to Pinnacle's board of directors. The same people who had approved my dismissal were now nodding appreciatively as I outlined how we would position Atlas in the manufacturing software market. The core value proposition is clear, I explained, advancing to the next slide. Atlas offers specialized production optimization that generic systems can't match, with proven ROI from our Michigan facility's performance metrics. Richard Coleman, who had once barely acknowledged my existence, was now leaning forward with interest. What's the timeline for the first external implementation? We have 3 pilot customers lined up for Q3, I replied. all mid-sized manufacturers with similar complexity to our Michigan operations. After the presentation, Chen and I walked back to the IT department together. "They loved it," he said. "Coleman asked me afterward if we had you locked into a long-term contract." I laughed. "What did you tell him?" "That we're still negotiating." Chen glanced at me. "We are, aren't we? The permanent position as chief product architect is still on the table." I had been considering my options. Several tech companies had approached me with generous offers after word spread about my role in salvaging Pinnacle's manufacturing systems. But none of them offered what Pinnacle now did: the chance to see my creation reach its full potential. "I'm leaning toward accepting," I admitted. "But I have one condition." "Name it." "Complete intellectual property recognition. My name on the patents, my story in the marketing." Chen smiled. "Already in the contract draft on your desk." As we reached the IT department, I saw Jake leading a training session for new hires, explaining Atlas's architecture with confidence and precision. He caught my eye and gave me a thumbs up. "You've built a good team," Chen observed. "Atlas doesn't depend solely on you anymore." "That was always the goal," I said. "I just needed the right environment to make it happen." Later that afternoon, I sat in my office reviewing the contract for the chief product architect position. It was everything Chen had promised: recognition, compensation, and creative control over Atlas's future development. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Heard about the Atlas commercialization. Well deserved. DM. David Mercer," acknowledging from afar that things had worked out as they should have. I signed the contract and sent it to HR, then walked to the window overlooking the sprawling Michigan factory. Somewhere in that massive complex, Atlas was humming along, orchestrating the precise dance of automation that kept production flowing. 20 years ago, I had started building a system. Along the way, I'd lost sight of building a life outside of work. The irony wasn't lost on me that I was now accepting another long-term commitment to Pinnacle. But this time was different. This time, I was valued not just for what I could do, but for what I had created. I thought back to that moment in the coffee shop parking lot, when rage and humiliation had driven me to contemplate sabotage. How close I had come to destroying everything I'd built, along with my professional reputation and possibly my freedom. Sometimes the best revenge isn't destruction. It's rising from the ashes of betrayal to claim the recognition you always deserved. It's transforming from expendable to indispensable, not because you're the only one who can do the job, but because you're the best at it. As I looked out over the factory that Atlas kept running, I realized I had something many people never achieve: concrete proof of my value, reflected in every precision component that rolled off the production line. And now, that value would extend beyond Pinnacle's walls to manufacturers around the world. I had been sacked after 20 years of loyalty. I had contemplated revenge, but instead of deleting the database that kept their $1.3 billion factory running, I had found a way to own my creation and share it with the world. That wasn't just success. It was vindication, and it was sweeter than revenge could ever be.